Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the HSV Liberty and watched the stars move slowly past the main screen. His ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now, far beyond any territory that humans had ever explored before. The mission was simple enough: map new star systems and look for planets that might be suitable for future colonies. What Jake did not expect was to find signs of intelligent life out here in the middle of nowhere. Lisa Park, his chief science officer, looked up from her console with excitement in her eyes. She had been tracking unusual energy readings for the past 2 hours and finally had something concrete to report. The readings were definitely artificial, which meant they were looking at technology created by some form of intelligent species. Jake felt his heart rate increase as he realized they might be about to make first contact with an alien civilization. The energy signatures were massive, much larger than anything humans had ever built. Lisa's scans showed 12 distinct sources, each one roughly the size of a small city. Jake ordered the ship to reduce speed and approach carefully. He had read all the first contact protocols during his training, but actually facing the possibility of meeting aliens was completely different from reading about it in a manual. Ryan Cooper, the chief engineer, reported that all systems were running normally and the ship was ready for anything they might encounter. Amy Foster at the weapons station confirmed that their defensive systems were online, though Jake hoped they would not need to use them. The whole point of this mission was peaceful exploration, not combat. As the Liberty moved closer, the objects became visible on the main screen. They were ships, but unlike anything humans had ever seen. Each vessel was enormous with strange curved surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. The design was beautiful in an alien way, but also intimidating due to their sheer size. Jake estimated that the smallest of these ships was at least 5 times larger than the Liberty. Sam Hughes at the communications station began broadcasting standard first contact messages on multiple frequencies. The messages included mathematical sequences, basic physics principles, and simple pictographs that any intelligent species should be able to understand. The idea was to show that humans were peaceful and wanted to communicate. For several minutes, there was no response. Then suddenly the alien ships began to move. They formed a perfect circle around the Liberty, trapping the human vessel in the center. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that this might not be going as planned. The alien ships were clearly more advanced and definitely had the advantage in numbers. The first communication from the aliens came as a harsh, static-filled transmission that hurt to listen to. Sam worked frantically to clean up the signal, but the translation systems could not make sense of the alien language. What came through clearly was the tone, which sounded angry and demanding. Lisa's scanners detected massive energy buildups in the alien ships. Whatever they were planning, it required enormous amounts of power. Jake ordered all hands to battle stations, though he still hoped this was just a misunderstanding that could be resolved peacefully. The largest alien ship moved closer to the Liberty. Through the view screen, Jake could see strange symbols and markings on its hull. The ship looked ancient but well-maintained, suggesting that these aliens had been traveling space for a very long time. This was clearly an established civilization, not some primitive species just learning to build spacecraft. Admiral Vex Karath stood on the command deck of his flagship and studied the unknown vessel trapped in the center of his fleet. In all his years serving the Catherian Empire, he had never encountered a ship that was not logged in their databases. Every species in this sector of space was either part of the Empire or had been conquered by it. This strange vessel represented something new and potentially dangerous. The unknown ship was small compared to his warships, but Korath had learned not to judge alien technology by size alone. Some species built compact but deadly vessels. The fact that this ship had traveled so far from any known civilization suggested it had advanced propulsion systems. Korath decided to proceed with caution. He ordered his communications officer to demand identification from the unknown vessel. The response was a series of strange signals that their translation computers could not process. The mathematical sequences seemed primitive, but there was something about the underlying technology that bothered Korath. The signals were too clean, too precisely modulated for a truly primitive species. Korath's science officer reported that the unknown ship was constructed from materials they had never encountered before. The hull seemed to absorb and redirect energy in ways that violated known physics. This was definitely not the work of any species the Empire had previously contacted. The Admiral made his decision. This vessel was clearly operating without Imperial permission in Catherian space. Whether it belonged to pirates, rebels, or some unknown enemy did not matter. The ship would be captured, and its crew interrogated. If they proved useful, they might be allowed to live as slaves. If not, they would be eliminated. Jake watched in growing alarm as the alien ships powered up what were obviously weapon systems. The energy readings were off the charts, far more powerful than anything in the human fleet. He tried one more time to communicate peaceful intentions, but the aliens seemed determined to attack. Amy Foster reported that the alien weapons were targeting their ship. Jake had only seconds to make a decision that could determine the fate of humanity's first contact with alien life. He could surrender and hope for mercy, or he could fight back and risk starting an interstellar war. The decision was made for him when the alien ships opened fire. Brilliant beams of energy struck the Liberty's shields, causing the entire ship to shake violently. Emergency alarms blared throughout the vessel as the crew struggled to maintain their positions. Ryan's voice came over the intercom, reporting that the shields were holding but taking massive damage. The alien weapons were more powerful than anything they had prepared for. If this continued much longer, the shields would fail and the ship would be destroyed. Jake looked at Amy and gave the order that would change everything. Return fire. The Liberty's quantum disruption torpedoes launched toward the largest alien ship, their exotic energy signatures invisible to conventional sensors. Jake did not know what effect they would have on alien technology, but he was about to find out. The first torpedo struck the alien flagship exactly where Amy had aimed it. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire massive vessel simply vanished in a flash of brilliant light. Where there had been a ship larger than anything humans had ever built, there was now only empty space and an expanding cloud of particles. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of alien voices screaming in panic across the communication channels. The destruction of the alien flagship sent shockwaves through both fleets, but for completely different reasons. On the Liberty, Jake Morrison stared at the empty space where the massive alien ship had been just moments before. He had expected their weapons to cause damage, but not to completely vaporize a vessel that was 5 times larger than his own ship. Amy Foster checked her weapons console 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. The quantum disruption torpedo had worked exactly as designed, but none of the test simulations had suggested it would be this effective against unknown alien technology. The torpedo was supposed to disrupt molecular bonds and cause structural failure, not cause complete matter conversion. Lisa Park frantically scanned the debris field where the alien ship had been. Her instruments detected exotic particles and energy signatures that made no sense according to human physics. Whatever had happened to that ship, it was beyond anything their scientists had predicted. The implications were terrifying and exciting. At the same time, Admiral Vex Korath had exactly 3 seconds to process what had happened to his flagship before his own ship was destroyed. In those 3 seconds, he managed to transmit an emergency message to the Catherian Empire. The message was brief, but contained enough information to throw the entire Imperial government into chaos. Unknown vessel, weapons beyond understanding, fleet strength insufficient. The remaining Catherian ships tried to retreat, but their movement was sluggish compared to human technology. Ryan Cooper reported that the alien ship seemed to use some form of space-time manipulation for propulsion, which was actually slower than human quantum drive systems. The aliens had size and firepower, but they lacked speed and maneuverability. Sam. Hughes intercepted communications between the surviving alien ships. Even without understanding their language, the panic in their voices was unmistakable. These beings had clearly never encountered weapons like the ones the Liberty carried. They were calling for reinforcements and evacuation protocols, suggesting that they considered their situation hopeless. Jake faced an impossible decision. His mission was peaceful exploration, but he was now in the middle of a battle that could determine humanity's future relationship with alien civilization. The aliens had attacked first, but that might have been due to misunderstanding rather than malicious intent. However, allowing them to escape could bring even more alien ships to human space. Ben Miller at the tactical station reported that the remaining alien ships were attempting to form a defensive formation. Their weapons were still targeting the Liberty, though their fire had become less coordinated after losing their command ship. It was clear that these aliens were experienced warriors, but they were facing technology they did not understand. The Liberty's adaptive gravitational shields continued to deflect alien weapons fire with surprising effectiveness. The system had been designed to protect against high-energy particle beams and plasma weapons, which turned out to be exactly what the aliens were using. Human military scientists had apparently made correct assumptions about how alien weapons might function. Amy launched a second torpedo at the nearest alien ship, this time aiming for what appeared to be their engine section. The goal was to disable rather than destroy, hoping to capture prisoners who might be able to explain what had just happened. However, the quantum disruption effect proved impossible to control precisely. The alien ship simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only scattered particles. The pattern repeated itself as more torpedoes found their targets. Each alien ship that was hit suffered complete molecular breakdown, regardless of where the torpedo struck. The human weapons were not just advanced, they were apparently several generations ahead of anything the aliens could defend against. Within 30 minutes of the first shot being fired, 11 Cytherian warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of exotic particles. Only one heavily damaged vessel managed to activate what appeared to be a faster-than-light drive system and escape into hyperspace. Jake decided not to pursue, recognizing that the survivors needed to carry news of this encounter back to their government. Lisa's post-battle analysis revealed disturbing information about the alien technology. The ships had been constructed using materials and engineering principles that were actually quite sophisticated. These aliens were not primitive savages. They were members of an advanced civilization that had probably been exploring space for thousands of years. The fact that human weapons had proven so effective was not due to alien weakness, but due to humanity having developed along completely different technological paths. Ryan examined the weapon performance data and reached conclusions that worried him greatly. The quantum disruption torpedoes had been designed as last resort weapons for use against artificial intelligence systems that had gone rogue. They were specifically built to overcome advanced defensive systems by attacking matter at the subatomic level. Against conventional technology, they were apparently unstoppable. The crew of the Liberty slowly began to understand what they had done. They had not just won a battle, they had demonstrated that humanity possessed weapons capable of destroying any known form of matter. If these aliens belonged to a larger civilization, that civilization would now view humanity as an existential threat that needed to be eliminated before it could spread. Sam managed to decode fragments of the alien communications that had been transmitted during the battle. The translations were rough, but they revealed that these ships belonged to something called the Cytherian Empire. References to patrol fleets and sector commands suggested that this empire was vast, possibly controlling multiple star systems across this region of space. Jake realized that the Liberty was now carrying information that could change the course of human history. They had made contact with a galactic empire and immediately went to war with them. Even worse, they had won that war so decisively that the aliens would probably consider humanity to be the greatest threat they had ever encountered. Salkir's journey back to human space would take several weeks, during which time the alien empire would be preparing for war. Jake had no way of knowing how many ships the Cytherians could field, but given the size of the vessels they had just destroyed, the numbers were probably enormous. Humanity might have superior weapons, but they definitely did not have superior numbers. Amy ran diagnostics on their remaining weapons and found that the Liberty was carrying enough quantum torpedoes to destroy perhaps 50 more alien ships. Against an empire that might field thousands of vessels, that would not be nearly enough. The only hope was that human military command could produce more of these weapons quickly enough to defend Earth and the colonies. The Liberty set course for home, carrying news that would either save humanity or doom it. Behind them, the debris fields of 11 alien warships drifted through space, silent testimony to the devastating effectiveness of human military technology. Somewhere in the darkness, the surviving alien ship was racing toward its home base, with news that would terrify an entire galactic empire. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and wondered if he had just started the first interstellar war in human history. Supreme Chancellor Zex Vorthak stood in the center of the Imperial command chamber, staring at the holographic display that showed the impossible battle report. The data had been transmitted directly from Admiral Korath's flagship in the final moments before its destruction. 11 ships of the Imperial Navy, including a heavy cruiser that had served for over 2 centuries, had been annihilated by a single unknown vessel. The silence in the command chamber was deafening. Military officers who had spent their entire careers believing in the absolute superiority of Catherian technology now faced evidence that their empire was no longer the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Defense Minister Kra Nexium cleared his throat nervously before speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. The surviving ship from the battle had arrived at the nearest Imperial base 3 hours ago, carrying detailed sensor recordings of the engagement. The recordings showed weapons that operated on principles completely unknown to Catherian science. The enemy torpedoes seemed to cause complete molecular breakdown, converting solid matter directly into energy and exotic particles. Chief, researcher Vel Morvac had been analyzing the weapon signatures since the data arrived. His preliminary report was more disturbing than anyone had expected. The unknown species possessed technology that was not just advanced, but seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics as the Catherians understood them. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible for a ship that small. Strategic Commander Nex Corvain presented the military implications to the assembled council. If this unknown species could field such weapons on exploration vessels, their actual military capabilities were beyond estimation. The Catherian Empire controlled 47 star systems and maintained client relationships with dozens of lesser species. All of that was now at risk. The economic implications were equally terrifying. The Empire's power structure was based on technological superiority over subject species. If word spread that the Catherians had been defeated in battle, rebellions would break out across Imperial space. Entire sectors might declare independence, believing that the Empire could no longer protect them or enforce compliance. Intelligence Coordinator Rax Venom reported that long-range sensors had detected no signs of the unknown vessel's origin point. The ship had appeared from deep space, engaged the patrol fleet, and then departed in the direction of unexplored territory. This suggested that humanity, as the aliens called themselves according to intercepted communications, controlled territory far beyond the Empire's current borders. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak faced the most difficult decision in the Empire's 1,000-year history. The traditional response would be to launch a massive military campaign to eliminate this new threat before it could spread. However, if the unknown species possessed weapons capable of destroying entire fleets, such a campaign might result in the destruction of the Imperial Navy. The alternative was equally unthinkable. The Empire could attempt diplomatic contact and try to negotiate some form of peaceful coexistence. However, this would require acknowledging that the Catherians were no longer the dominant military power in the galaxy. Such an admission would undermine the entire foundation of Imperial authority. Defense Minister Nexium argued for immediate military action. The Empire had over 3,000 warships scattered across its territory. Even with superior weapons, the unknown species could not possibly have enough ships to face the entire Imperial Navy. A coordinated assault using overwhelming numbers might succeed where the patrol fleet had failed. Chief Researcher Morvac disagreed strongly. His analysis suggested that the unknown weapons worked by manipulating fundamental forces at the quantum level. Traditional defensive measures would be useless against such technology. Attacking without understanding how the weapons functioned would only result in more ships being destroyed. Strategic Commander Corvain proposed a middle course. The Empire should mobilize its forces but avoid direct confrontation until more information could be gathered. Reconnaissance missions could attempt to locate the unknown species' territory and assess their actual military strength. Only then could informed decisions be made about how to proceed. The debate continued for hours as the Council struggled with concepts that challenged everything they believed about warfare and technology. The Catherian Empire had grown complacent after centuries of unchallenged dominance. Now they faced enemies who had developed along completely different technological paths, resulting in weapons that seemed almost magical in their effectiveness. Intelligence. Reports from across the Empire painted a disturbing picture. News of the defeat was spreading despite official attempts at secrecy. Client species were asking questions about Imperial military strength. Some were quietly moving their fleets away from border regions, preparing for possible independence movements. The economic markets were beginning to show strain as well. Trading companies that relied on Imperial protection for their operations were reconsidering their investments. The value of Imperial currency was dropping, as confidence in the government's ability to maintain order began to weaken. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak finally made his decision. The Imperial War Fleet would be assembled for the first time in over 2 centuries. Every available warship would be recalled to the capital system for coordination and planning. This massive show of force would serve dual purposes, reassuring subject species while preparing for possible military action. However, the war fleet would not attack immediately. Instead, it would serve as the foundation for the largest intelligence gathering operation in Imperial history. Scout ships would be dispatched to search for the unknown species' territory. Diplomatic protocols would be prepared in case peaceful contact became possible. Military contingency plans would be developed for every conceivable scenario. The assembly of the war fleet would take several months, during which time the Empire would be in a state of barely controlled panic. Every day that passed without news would increase tension throughout Imperial space. The Catherian Empire, which had ruled this region of the galaxy for a millennium, was about to discover whether it could adapt to a universe where it was no longer the dominant power. Fleet Admiral Korvestak received orders to begin immediate mobilization of all available vessels. The Admiral was a veteran of dozens of campaigns against rebellious client species, but he had never faced enemies with technology superior to his own. The challenge would require new tactics and strategies that had never been tested in actual combat. As the council session ended, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's massive windows. Somewhere out there was a species that had just announced its presence by destroying an Imperial patrol fleet. Whether that species would prove to be humanity's salvation or its doom remained to be seen. The Catherian Empire, which had seemed eternal and unchanging, was about to enter the most dangerous period in its history. The HSV Liberty raced through space toward human territory, its quantum drive systems pushed to maximum capacity. Captain Jake Morrison stood in his ready room, staring at the reports his crew had compiled about their encounter with the alien fleet. The numbers were staggering and terrifying. They had destroyed 11 ships that were each larger than anything in the human fleet, using weapons that had performed far beyond their design specifications. Lisa Park knocked on his door before entering with her latest analysis of the alien technology they had recovered from the debris fields. The materials were unlike anything human science had encountered before. The aliens used some form of crystalline metal that could conduct energy with perfect efficiency while remaining incredibly durable. Their weapons technology was sophisticated, but followed conventional principles that human scientists could understand. Ryan Cooper joined them with engineering reports that were equally disturbing. The alien ships had been powered by some form of controlled matter-antimatter reaction that produced enormous amounts of energy. Based on the size of their reactors, each alien vessel could have powered a human city for decades. The scale of their technology suggested a civilization with resources far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Amy Foster brought tactical assessments that painted an even grimmer picture. The alien ships had been armed with enough firepower to glass an entire planet. Their defensive systems, while useless against quantum disruption torpedoes, would have been impenetrable to conventional human weapons. The fact that such heavily armed vessels had been operating as a simple patrol fleet suggested that the alien military was enormous. Sam Hughes reported that he had been monitoring long-range communications channels for any sign of alien activity. So far, there had been nothing except normal background radiation. However, this silence was more ominous than reassuring. If the aliens were planning retaliation, they were doing so without using detectable communication methods. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Fleet Admiral Kor Vestak commanded the largest military operation in Catherian history. Over 300 warships had been assembled into a massive search formation, following the projected course of the unknown vessel back toward its point of origin. The Admiral had never commanded so many ships at once, and the responsibility was overwhelming. The search pattern was methodical and thorough. Each star system along the projected course was investigated by reconnaissance teams equipped with the most advanced sensors available. The goal was to locate the unknown species territory without triggering another devastating battle. After what had happened to Admiral Korath's fleet, no one wanted to engage the aliens without overwhelming superiority. Strategic Commander Nex Corvain had developed contingency plans for every possible scenario. If the aliens proved to be a small civilization with limited military resources, the Empire would demand tribute and submission. If they controlled significant territory, diplomatic contact would be attempted. If they posed an existential threat to the Empire, they would be eliminated using every weapon at the Empire's disposal. The first discovery came when advanced scouts located a human colony world designated New Portland. Governor Steve Martinez had been leading the peaceful agricultural settlement for 5 years, overseeing the development of farming communities that supplied food to nearby human systems. The colony had minimal defensive installations and a population of only 50,000 settlers. Admiral Vestak studied the reconnaissance reports with growing confusion. The human settlement showed no signs of advanced military technology. Their orbital platforms were clearly designed for cargo handling rather than defense. The planetary infrastructure was typical of an early-stage agricultural colony, with no evidence of weapons manufacturing or military preparation. The discovery created a crisis of understanding for the Catherian command structure. How could a species with such primitive colonies possess weapons capable of destroying Imperial warships? Either the humans were hiding their true capabilities, or their military technology was concentrated in specialized vessels, rather than distributed throughout their territory. Chief Researcher Fel Morvac proposed that the humans might have developed their advanced weapons recently, possibly in response to some external threat. This would explain why their colonies appeared primitive while their exploration vessels carried devastating armaments. The implications were disturbing, suggesting that humans were actively preparing for interstellar warfare. The Catherian fleet established long-range surveillance of New Portland while avoiding direct contact. The goal was to study human behavior and technology without triggering another battle. However, maintaining stealth with over 300 warships proved challenging, especially when human sensors began detecting gravitational anomalies caused by the fleet's presence. Governor Martinez received the first reports of unusual activity in the outer system from his small defense force. The readings were inconsistent with natural phenomena, suggesting that someone was conducting surveillance of the colony. Martinez immediately sent emergency communications to Earth, reporting possible alien activity in the New Portland system. The message took several days to reach Earth through the relay networks, during which time tension on New Portland continued to escalate. Colonial Defense Force personnel prepared evacuation plans while trying to maintain normal operations. The settlers were told that routine security exercises were being conducted, but rumors spread quickly through the small community. Admiral Vestak faced increasingly difficult decisions as his surveillance operation continued. The humans appeared to be aware of his presence but had not taken any aggressive action. Their defense forces were obviously inadequate to threaten his fleet, yet the memory of what had happened to Admiral Korath made him reluctant to approach too closely. Intelligence gathered from the surveillance operation painted a picture of a civilization that was both familiar and alien. The humans used technology that was advanced in some areas while remaining primitive in others. Their quantum drive systems were actually superior to Catherian propulsion, but their weapons technology appeared limited to conventional kinetic and energy weapons. The contradiction between human colony defenses and the weapons demonstrated by the exploration vessel continued to puzzle Catherian analysts. Either the humans were deliberately hiding their capabilities, or their advanced weapons were extremely rare and expensive to produce. Both possibilities had significant implications for military planning. As the surveillance continued, more human ships began arriving in the New Portland system. These vessels appeared to be civilian transports and cargo haulers, but they carried sophisticated sensor arrays that made reconnaissance more difficult. The humans were clearly reinforcing the colony, though whether for defense or evacuation remained unclear. The HSV Liberty finally reached communication range with Earth after 3 weeks of hard travel. Captain Morrison transmitted priority alerts to Colonial Defense Command, providing detailed information about the alien encounter and the likely threat it represented. The message included complete sensor recordings of the battle and analysis of alien technology, recovered from the debris fields. Admiral Kate Thompson received the alert at Colonial Defense Headquarters on Earth. As she read through Morrison's report, she realized that humanity was facing its first contact with an alien civilization, and that first contact had immediately escalated into armed conflict. The decisions made in the next few hours could determine whether humanity survived as an independent species or became extinct. The stage was set for a confrontation that neither side wanted but both sides were preparing for. In the depths of space, the largest alien fleet in centuries continued its methodical approach toward human territory, while Earth's military commanders struggled to understand the scope of the threat they faced. Admiral Kate Thompson stood in the Emergency Command Center deep beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by displays showing the disposition of every human military asset in known space. The reports from Captain Morrison had changed everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the galaxy. Not only were there advanced alien civilizations out there, but humanity had already gone to war with one of them. The quantum disruption torpedo technology that had proven so effective against the alien fleet was the result of a crash development, programmed during humanity's recent conflict with rogue artificial intelligence systems. Dr. Rachel Murphy, the lead scientist on the project, explained that the weapons had been designed specifically to overcome advanced defensive systems by attacking matter at the subatomic level. General Paul Harris, commanding Earth's Space Defense Forces, argued for immediate military mobilization. Every available warship should be equipped with quantum torpedoes and dispatched to defend the outer colonies. The alien fleet that Admiral Vestok commanded represented an existential threat that required the strongest possible response. However, Admiral Thompson had spent her career studying military history and recognized the danger of escalating a conflict that might have started from a misunderstanding. The reports from New Portland suggested that the aliens were conducting surveillance rather than preparing for immediate attack. This might represent an opportunity for diplomatic resolution rather than continued warfare. Dr. Murphy proposed a radical alternative to military action. Instead of preparing for war, humanity should attempt to communicate with the aliens using the same quantum manipulation technology that made their weapons so effective. The aliens had clearly never encountered such technology before, which suggested they might be willing to negotiate if they understood that humans possessed defensive capabilities they could not overcome. Ambassador Carl Watson was called in to lead what would become the most important diplomatic mission in human history. Watson had extensive experience in conflict resolution and had successfully negotiated peace agreements in several interplanetary disputes. However, none of his previous assignments had involved aliens whose psychology and motivations were completely unknown. The fleet that assembled to meet the Catherian force was unlike anything humanity had ever deployed. Along with military vessels equipped with quantum weapons, the formation included clearly marked hospital ships, research vessels, and communication platforms. The goal was to demonstrate both defensive capability and peaceful intentions. Fleet. Admiral Kor Vestok detected the approaching human fleet long before it reached the neutral zone between human and Catherian territory. His sensors showed approximately 50 vessels, which was far fewer than he had expected. However, the memory of what a single human ship had done to Admiral Korath's fleet made him extremely cautious about the size of the opposing force. The lead human vessel began broadcasting on multiple frequencies as soon as it came within communication range. The signals included mathematical principles, universal physical constants, and what appeared to be linguistic analysis protocols. Admiral Vestak recognized this as an attempt at peaceful communication, but he remained suspicious about human motivations. Dr. Rachel Murphy had worked frantically during the journey to develop translation protocols based on the alien communication fragments that Captain Morrison had recorded. The breakthrough came when she realized that the aliens used a mathematical base system similar to humans, which provided a foundation for building more complex linguistic bridges. The first successful communication exchange lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough to establish that both species were intelligent and capable of rational thought. Admiral Vestak transmitted basic numerical sequences, which Dr. Murphy's team immediately recognized and responded to with more complex mathematical relationships. Over the course of several days, the two fleets maintained their positions while communication specialists from both sides worked to establish a functional translation system. The process was slow and frustrating, but gradually both sides began to understand what had actually happened during the first contact incident. Captain Jake Morrison was invited aboard a neutral communication platform that had been hastily constructed by engineering teams from both fleets. The platform was a simple structure designed to allow face-to-face meetings while maintaining the safety of both delegations. Morrison found himself sitting across from Admiral Vestak, two beings from different worlds trying to prevent an interstellar war. The conversation that followed revealed the tragic misunderstanding that had started the entire conflict. Morrison explained that the Liberty had been an exploration vessel, equipped with experimental weapons for protection against unknown threats. The humans had never intended to attack the Catherian fleet, and had fired only in self-defense when their peaceful communications were ignored. Admiral Vestak admitted that the Catherian Empire had grown complacent after centuries of unchallenged dominance. When they encountered a vessel they did not recognize in their territory, they had automatically assumed it was either pirates or rebels. The idea that it might belong to an unknown civilization had never seriously been considered. The revelation that both sides had been preparing for a war that neither actually wanted came as a relief to military commanders on both sides. However, the underlying issues that had caused the conflict still needed to be addressed. The Catherian Empire controlled vast territories that humans might eventually want to explore, while humanity possessed weapons technology that the Catherians found threatening. Ambassador Watson proposed a framework for peaceful coexistence that addressed the concerns of both civilizations. Formal diplomatic relations would be established between humanity and the Catherian Empire. Joint exploration missions would be conducted in neutral territory to build trust and understanding between the two species. Technology sharing agreements would ensure that both civilizations benefited from contact rather than viewing each other as threats. The negotiations took several weeks, as both sides worked through the complex details of establishing formal relations between civilizations that had very different social and political structures. The Catherian Empire was a hierarchical society based on conquest and dominance, while humanity was a collection of independent colonies united by shared values and mutual cooperation. However, the threat that had brought them together also provided the foundation for their agreement. Both civilizations recognized that the galaxy was vast and largely unexplored. If there were other species out there with hostile intentions, humanity and the Catherian Empire would be stronger as allies than as enemies. The final agreement was signed aboard the neutral platform by representatives of both species. The document established formal diplomatic relations, defined territorial boundaries, and created frameworks for peaceful interaction. Most importantly, it included provisions for joint defense against external threats and shared exploration of unknown regions. Captain Morrison found himself assigned as the first human liaison officer aboard a joint exploration vessel. The ship carried a mixed crew of humans and Catherians, working together to map new star systems and search for signs of other intelligent life. The mission represented everything that exploration should be: peaceful contact between different species working toward common goals. As the combined fleets prepared to return to their respective territories, Admiral Thompson reflected on how close both civilizations had come to mutual destruction. The weapons that humanity had developed were indeed capable of defeating Catherian technology, but the Catherian Empire controlled enough territory and resources to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. The conflict that became known as the Panic War had lasted only a few weeks but had changed the course of galactic history. Two civilizations that should have been natural allies had almost destroyed each other through fear and misunderstanding. The resolution of the crisis demonstrated that even the most devastating conflicts could be resolved through communication and mutual respect. The HSV Liberty, now equipped with both human and Catherian technology, departed on its next exploration mission with Captain Morrison still in command. Behind it followed a new age of cooperation between species that had once viewed each other as existential threats but had learned to see each other as partners in the vast endeavor of exploring the galaxy.